Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm happy to see you. Happy Thursday. Spring is in the air. It seems like those that popped in early, we were talking about, it seems like things are changing rapidly, and I'm feeling very positive today. So that's a great place to be. I invited Mr. Andrews, who is a social studies teacher here. He's also one of our department chairs for social studies, but he is a social emotional learning expert. I'm going to tag him with mindfulness and brain chemistry. He's actually, a lot of what he's going to present and share with you guys today, he's actually shared with the staff. And I remember when he shared with the staff, I was thinking this would be a great thing to teach parents about, because I know as the parent of a teenager, I definitely, my question to start out today was like, have you ever found yourself being frustrated with your teenager? Like the way they're thinking and the way they react to things, it seems like so like not normal and, just insane. And so I think that this will be really helpful for all of us that are parents of teenagers to understand them a little bit better. So, Mr. Andrews.
Yeah, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Davis, for inviting me to be here. There's few things I love more than talking about the brain, mindfulness, social emotional learning. And thank you for the introduction. I don't know if I would consider myself an expert, but I've definitely spent a lot of time researching this topic. And for the past 10 years, I've also been training teachers across the country and in other school districts on how to use these tools in their classrooms. So I'm excited to share some of that with you today. And for those of you who like to learn at your own pace, I did put the link to the PowerPoint in the chat just now. So if you want to pull that up, take a look later. I will share my screen so that you can follow along here. But just so you have that, if I go too quickly or if I'm going too slowly, if you want to jump ahead, that's totally fine. I get that. So let's go ahead and get started. Today, I want to take you through some different activities related to understanding your brain. And when we can understand our brains better, we're going to connect to how your brain might be a little bit different than a teenager's brain. So let me share my screen here with everyone so that we can get into this. So that's me right there, social studies teacher, mindfulness, and brain trainer. So here's my first question for you, and you can feel free to respond in the chat if you'd like. If you don't want to share with everyone, you could send me a private message, or you could send a private message to Ms. Davis. Are you afraid of change? I want to see a few comments on this. Are you afraid of change? How do you feel about change? Virginia is excited for change. Change is good, according to Ms. Perlin. Sometimes change can be exciting. Yes. It really just depends on what type of change it is, right? Is it a negative change? Is it a positive change? Is it moving in the right direction or the wrong direction based on our perception? It really depends. So maybe we could agree on this type of change. Are you afraid of receiving $1 million? Would that make you afraid? I mean, maybe you'd be unsure or what to do with it, or, but I don't think any of us would really be especially afraid in a typical sense of the word, right? We wouldn't be like, man, I can't believe you gave me $1 million. What the heck is wrong with you? Like really mad at me for giving you $1 million. By the way, this is a fake bill. I don't think we have $1 million. Do we have that, Jenny? Do we have $1 million?
I don't believe so. But
okay, so that's not quite. We haven't reached that level of inflation, although we might. I'll keep politics out of it, but I'm a government teacher, so sorry. You wouldn't be afraid of this type of change, right? This is something that wouldn't bother. So what is it about change that students or teenage brains are sometimes afraid of? And I'll tell you that it comes from the work of a very famous economist named Daniel Kahneman. And he wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow, which kind of outlined his 40 years of research in Israel and the United States. That in the summary of his work is that we're not afraid of change, we're afraid of loss. We're not afraid of change, we're afraid of loss. we struggle to deal with loss. When we lose something, we experience pain in our brains. Our brain processes that as pain, or could process that as pain. And so we're not really afraid of the change. We're afraid of losing something else. What happens if you get $1 million? Well, maybe you lose some of your traditions with your family because people are traveling now and spending money on yachts. I don't know. Can you even buy a yacht for $1 million? No, you need a lot more money than that. But anyways, I'm not rich enough to understand my own example. So if we have change that isn't accompanied with a loss, or our brains don't see it as a loss, then our brains will view it more positively. And so the question then becomes, how can we get teenage brains to view things that are changing as not a loss, but simply a change? And I think right now in a pandemic, it's been especially difficult for students to see this because they do feel like they're losing out on school and their friendships and things like that. And I'm sure you've seen that at home as well, in terms of kids feeling like their lives are kind of being taken from them in some ways. Jenny, have you seen that with your kids?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So let's jump into the first section on psychology and brain training. So I want to share with you 3 parts of the brain, and you can see here the 3 parts of the brain that primarily we use for reactions, for learning, and for recalling information. So, question for you. Have you ever had trouble falling asleep at night? You ever have trouble falling asleep at night?
Frequently.
Has that ever happened to you before? You can't go to sleep. Why can't you just go to sleep? Why don't you just tell your brain, go to sleep? Like, you're all smart people. Why can't you just be like, you know what, Dave, go to sleep right now? Can you do that? I mean, like right now, could you just be like, go to sleep, instantly fall asleep? It's not that easy, is it? Right? Or maybe this one kind of freaks me out. Sometimes I'm driving home and I'm leaving school. It's been a busy day. It's been a stressful day. And I end up in my driveway and I don't remember driving home. Right? Not that I like blacked out or anything, but like my brain was distracted thinking about the day, right? Thinking and planning. I love how you said that in the chat, Virginia. Thinking and planning about what I'm going to do later, that suddenly I just work on autopilot, if you will. And I'm home. And I don't drive a Tesla, so I don't actually have autopilot. So really, my brain was just distracted. So who is really in charge of our brains then? Are you in charge of your brain, or is your brain in charge of you? What do you think? Who's in charge of your brain? Are you in charge of your brain, or is your brain in charge of you? What do you think, Ms. Davis?
I think my brain is in charge of me. It's kind of like a chicken or the egg. So, yeah.
What about right now? Would you say your brain is in charge of you right now, or you're more in charge of your brain?
I would say I'm more in charge of my brain.
Interesting, right? So when I gave the first examples, you feel like your brain's maybe more in charge of you when it comes to going to sleep or driving home on autopilot. But right now, when you're awake, maybe fresh, it's still the morning. I don't know what else you have to do today, but you're a little bit more focused in right now, perhaps.
I mean, I would say that like things like emotions and stuff like that that come up means you don't necessarily have control over. Like you don't, like something happens and your reaction to it, you don't like think about like, oh, this is how I'm going to react to it. It just happens.
Yeah, totally. Right. So I love how you're referencing the amygdala. So if you look at this chart here, there's 2 pink kind of dots or balls there, one on either side of your brain. And the amygdala is one of the pieces of our brain that's really responsible for sensing emotions and responding to different stimuli within our environment. So if I were like to be in the same room as you, and I were to take my phone and I were to throw it at you, Miss Davis, what would you do if I threw my phone at you? Like, what would be your physical reaction?
I would duck.
So you would duck. So
Yeah.
we call that flight, right? In psychology, you have this concept of flight. You also could like knock it down, right? You could hit it out of the air. Some of you might hit it out of the air. That's fight. We call that fight, right? And then there's a third type where it might just hit you in the face because you're too slow, and we call that freeze. So we've got fight, flight, or freeze, and maybe you remember that from your psychology class back in the day. So these elements, fight, flight, and freeze, are controlled by our amygdala. And our amygdala is very much the primitive part of our brain. It's kind of there to protect you. It's a reflex. It operates automatically. That is the autopilot part of our brain. So what am I telling you? You can't control your brain? Like your brain's just in charge of you? Well, no. If we use other parts of our brain, we actually can control the amygdala. But if we don't use these other parts, then that's how we end up on autopilot. That's how we end up with our brain kind of hijacking our emotions and relying on our amygdala. Yep. So let's talk about the prefrontal cortex, because this is the key to knowing how to control and calm our emotions. So this blue part here in the cerebellum is the prefrontal cortex. And this is the thinking part of your brain, right? This is what allows you to process words, numbers, to use logic. If you could understand the words that I'm saying right now, your prefrontal cortex is working. And if you heard me say your prefrontal cortex is working, your prefrontal cortex is working. This is the thinking part of your brain. Now, the more this part of your brain is turned on, the more you're able to say, you know what? I recognize I'm upset. I recognize that I'm driving on autopilot. I recognize that I'm having trouble falling asleep. And I'm going to choose to do something else. Sounds like a tall order, I suppose. How is the question, you may ask? How is the question? We're going to get to that in just a second. Last one, the last thing here is the hippocampus. The hippocampus. So this is what stores our memories, and particularly long-term memories are stored in the hippocampus. So maybe you can relate to this. You back when you were in school, you studied for a test, you thought you prepared, you had taken notes, you paid attention in class, you were an A+ student, right, Miss Davis? And and yet you go to a test and you start to look at the test, you read the first question, and you're like, oh crap, I don't remember this. Has that ever happened to you before?
Yes.
Yeah. So what happens there is a hippocampus issue. It's actually in your brain, but you can't pull it out of your hippocampus very easily. You learned it, but you kind of forgot it. Anyways, so let's do an experiment here. Oh, sorry. That is a cockroach. I apologize if anyone's afraid of bugs. You can minimize the Zoom screen so you won't see it. But I want to do an experiment to connect the three parts of the brain. And let's just try this. It works better in person, but we'll just try it online. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to find a flat surface. Okay, so if you have a table in front of you, or if you're at a desk, just clear off like a little 1 foot box of space. Okay, and I want you to take your hand, okay, your 5 fingers, or however many fingers you have, and I want you to place them onto the table, just your fingertips, okay, like a claw. Right, there we go. Okay, and spread your fingertips apart. So you've just got your fingertips on the table. And now I'd invite you to close your eyes for just a moment, if you feel comfortable. It works better if you close your eyes, because I'm going to have you imagine a scenario. And what I'm going to try to do is activate different parts of your brain to help us understand how our brain works to respond to a stimulus. So with your eyes closed, you've got your fingers, 5 fingertips touching the end of the table. Now, I want you to imagine that there is a cockroach on the table, not near you, but far away from you. It's not going to touch you. It's not around you. Just picture it's this little cockroach, 6 brown little legs, its little brown antenna looking at you. It's not harmful. It's not going to hurt you. Now, I want you to imagine this cockroach starts to walk towards your thumb. It doesn't touch you. It just walks towards your thumb. It scurries around your thumb, and it goes up to your pointer finger. It looks at your pointer finger. And then it scurries along your middle finger and over to your ring finger. And finally, it stops at your pinky. And you can imagine this little brown cockroach looking at the fingernail of your pinky. And its 6 little legs just kind of wiggling its antenna at you. Now, all of a sudden, this cockroach starts to crawl up your finger and starts to crawl on your hand. And you feel the little legs crawling up your arm. Okay, open your eyes.
I'm
How
like,
many of you, go ahead, Jenny.
sorry, that was so triggering.
Why do you say that?
Well, because when I was in college once, and I went to college in Texas, and there were cockroaches all over the place, and there was one in my house, and the antenna of the cockroach like was brushing up against my leg, and I like just thought it was like an itch, and I looked down and I saw it was like brushing up against my legs, and like I swear to God, I jumped 10 feet in the air, literally like flew across, completely freaked out. So that was very, yeah, I got sweaty just that whole experience.
Yvonne, you commented you have chills. What was so, why was that so powerful for you? What about that was powerful for you?
Because I'm not really afraid of anything really at all, except for cockroaches. So I literally have like chills on my arm, like I can't.
And do you know why you're afraid of cockroaches? Is there a particular instance or?
Yeah. When I was, I went to India and I had one in my soup, and the server went back and just poured me a fresh bowl from the same pot, and it just like did something to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I can't.
Interesting. So both Miss Davis and Miss Gunter both described an experience, a memory, right here in our hippocampus. And what do you notice that your hippocampus is attached to? If you look here at this diagram, the hippocampus, there's two of them, one on either side in green here on the diagram. What do you notice that they're attached to? Can you see that? Can you guys see that on your screen? You notice that they're attached to these pink balls here, the amygdala. And why is that so powerful? Well, your amygdala, your emotions are actually literally neurologically attached to your memories, which means when you remember something, in this case, a negative memory, sorry, I had to pick something because it's our negative memories tend to be stronger. If you remember that, you'll relive those negative feelings. So right now you're actually like not in a good place for learning. This is a bad idea to do this in terms of a learning structure, learning science, because I just kind of triggered you, right? To use what Miss Gunter said. So when we know this, when we can pull out memories, right? Not only could we pull out negative memories, but we could also do the same thing with positive memories. And when we can learn to control our brain, we can learn to have better opportunities to respond to these negative memories. So what some of you might have happened, and anyone can comment if they had this experience, some of you might have started this experiment with me. You had your eyes closed. I said, imagine a cockroach, and you stopped. You opened your eyes, or you said, I'm not going to do this. Mr. Andrews is messing with us. This is stupid. I'm not a kid. I'm not going to fall for this joke. Whatever it is, those people are using their prefrontal cortex hella, like a lot. You're really living in this blue area here. And maybe that's because you already knew what reaction you were going to have. You knew you were going to have a negative reaction to it. So you literally chose with your prefrontal cortex not to engage with that today. You said, I don't want to do that right now. I just showered. I don't want to go through this experience. We're not going there. And you chose to do that. Now, teenagers don't have the same level of ability to choose. I mean, they do theoretically, but it's more difficult for them to choose. Teenagers are so much easier to trick, are so much easier to get into this imaginary mindset, right? You take them through a simulation, they suspend their belief easier than adults typically. And there's a reason for that. Their brains are still developing in a way that people over the age of 25, which I imagine most of us here are not, right? So our brains develop at 3 different points in our life. The first, maybe you've heard of this, is the terrible twos. Anybody heard of that? When kids are 2 or 3 years old, their brain goes through this pruning process that really takes a lot of different neurons that they're not using and gets rid of them, sheds them, and then the ones that they have used, it strengthens them. And that's really stressful for your brain. And so what happens is that kids tend to be moody and emotional. The second time that happens is when you're a teenager, when you go through puberty. And so most of our students, or your sons and daughters, they've already gone through that second phase, and they were also probably pretty moody then. The third time that happens, and the last time that really happens in your life, is when you're around 25. So for most of us, our brains are kind of wired in a particular way that can be changed, but it's more difficult for them to change. Whereas teenagers, they're between the second wiring and the third wiring. So they've got this beautiful window where they're especially able to rewire their brain much more easily than adults are. And this special window allows them to learn how to manage their emotions, how to pull out memories better, and how to control their brain using their prefrontal cortex. All right. Any questions about these parts of the brain before we move on? Okay, there will be a quiz at the end, Ms. Davis, so make sure you're taking notes.
I have a question.
Sure.
So would you say because teenagers have lived less time, in their life, have less memories to trigger emotions, to trigger, that thought of, wait, this has happened to me in the past?
Yeah.
Is that kind of a correlation?
It is. And unfortunately, for some kids, they've had more trauma or more adverse childhood experiences than other kids, right? So it really depends on the kid. And I'm not blaming any particular person or group for that experience. Like, our brain perceives trauma in all sorts of ways. But the more traumas we have, typically the more difficult it is, and the more we respond emotionally to things, since that part of the brain, the amygdala, gets activated. So
these children or teenagers tend to, quote unquote, mature faster, you would say?
From a brain standpoint, they use one part of their brain more than the other. It's not that I wouldn't say they're maturing faster, because their brain is just using their prefrontal cortex more, if they're able to better respond to that. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So how can we calm our brains? How can we teach teenagers to take control of their brain more? Right? If I identified the problem, I'd be a real jerk if I didn't give you any solutions, right? So let's go ahead and talk about a brain break and what a brain break is. A brain break is my term for just a moment to pause and try to slow down the amygdala. When the amygdala is like, alert, alert, alarm, going off, danger, danger, the brain break allows you to say, okay, is this really a dangerous situation? Or is this an imaginary cockroach? Is this actually dangerous? Is my life being threatened? If it is, I need to respond quickly. If it's not, then I'm probably okay, and I need to calm down. So how do we calm down? Let's take a brain break. So there's a lot of words on the screen. Please do not try to read them all, but they're here for those of you who want captions to what I'm about to do. So this is an activity that I lead with my students in class every day for the most part. And essentially, it's just a moment to use breathing to help calm our brains down. So why don't you just experience it first, and then we can talk about the effect and how it felt, or how it worked or didn't work for you. So I'm just going to invite everyone to sit comfortably and relax, whatever that means for you. Or if you're laying down, that's fine too. You can lay down, no problem. And if you'd like to close your eyes, you could. It just helps me focus a little bit more on my breath. And with your eyes closed, I invite you to just notice how you're breathing today. Notice the air that's filling your nostrils, traveling down your windpipe, and filling your lungs. Exhale gently through your mouth. Don't try to change your breathing. Just allow your body to breathe naturally. Notice your stomach rising as you inhale and falling as you exhale. Just relax and breathe. And I invite you to slowly and gently open your eyes and come back to the room when you're ready. Thank you. Okay. So how was that experience for you? Did you feel any different? Did you feel the same? Again, you can use the reactions if you'd like, or you can tell me in the chat. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. What was that like for you? So we just spent a minute breathing.
I found it to be very calming after the whole cockroach incident. So
Great. Yeah, so some of you might have felt it a little bit difficult to do as well. That's normal, especially if you're not used to breathing in an intentional way. And a lot of students, you know, they come into class and they're very like upset, like they'd just seen a cockroach, you know. But a lot of times the cockroach is not actually a cockroach. It's their math test, it's their history paper, it's their exam coming up tomorrow, it's their job they got to go to after school, it's the siblings they got to take care of, it's the dinner they got to cook, their chores, whatever it is, it's the stress, right? The cockroach is a metaphor for stress. And so using a brain break is a tool to help us calm down from that stress. This is maybe an actual photo of me as a child. I did not have long hair, but this is how I was in school. You know, I was very very mobile in school. Why don't we put into the chat, what are some words you would use to describe this kid? How would you describe this kid? If you don't know anything about them, just seeing this image here, what words come to mind? How would you describe? Fidgety, okay. Restless, unfocused, bored, tired. Okay. Distracted. Thinking. So how many of those words that we used were positive? Would you classify as positive? Not too many, right? Maybe some are neutral. Maybe thinking is neutral, right? Or tired could be neutral, right? But the rest may be leaning more towards the negative. You know, when I was a kid, I have ADHD. When I was a kid, the teachers would be like, why can't you sit still? And why are you, you know, always moving around? And like, you need to behave yourself. You know, like I was a bad kid, right? For moving. And what we know is that a lot of kids just have extra energy in their brain. And I had a teacher, Miss Coughlin, in third grade, who I was moving around in my chair like that. And she came up to me and I go, oh crap, I'm in trouble again. Here comes Miss Coughlin. Like, dang it. Like, I don't want to be in trouble. You know, I wasn't a bad kid in my mind. Miss Coughlin came up to me and she smiled and she was like, Dave, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I have a lot of energy. And she's like, no, that's awesome. It's awesome. All that means is that you have so much energy and your extra energy in your brain. You just have to find a way to focus it. And I was like, kind of surprised, like, really? Like this is a good thing? And she's like, yeah. Well, I mean, you're moving around in your chair, so you're kind of distracting other students. So we don't want to use your energy in that way. But what if we could take your energy and channel it in a more productive way for you to help you learn better and to help you sit still, learn how to sit still. So I want to share with you some things that can work if you are having trouble focusing. I'll tell you that This is a menu, so you could take something from here, you can leave something that doesn't work. You might have seen that your son or daughter has trouble like sitting down and focusing for long periods of time. Well, here's some ideas. The first one is to take a brain break. Your breath, deep breathing, is the best way to calm down. It calms the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the system that's activated with fight, flight, or freeze. It reduces cortisol levels in your blood, which is the hormone that causes stress or causes the feelings of stress. So we know there's a lot of physiological benefits from breathing itself. Try this one. Take your fingers like this, like you're a little lobster or crab, okay? And then grab your shirt, grab onto your shirt or some article of clothing. And I want you to just rub your fingers together. Just try it out. It's kind of weird, but don't worry, I can't see you because you don't have your camera on. And just listen to the sound of my voice as you rub your finger together against the fabric. And you might notice that you're just a little bit more focused or a little bit calmer. And what's happening is this is literally a kinetic energy transfer. You're taking the energy from your brain through your arm, through your fingers, and into your shirt. You're getting rid of excess energy. Okay. Any of you stand up and work or like to walk and work or pace while you're thinking? This works really well. This works really well. You might also try using an exercise ball. So I have a few exercise balls in my classroom and also at my house, but if you get one for your son or daughter, they can sit on the exercise ball, pull it up to the table or to a desk, and they can just sit here and bounce, just bounce. And again, it gets rid of energy. It's also a great core workout if they need that. So doubles. And then of course, the last one, the most important, is just remembering to smile, take a deep breath, keeping things in perspective.
So Dave, I have a question because I also have ADHD, but I'm not the hyperactive type. I am the type that's my brain is just going to be a million miles away. And I may look like I'm paying attention, but I am absolutely not paying attention. And I'm going to be completely honest, like I have gotten very good and managed to, when somebody calls on me, to come back real quick and fake it real well. But I'll be like inside, like, oh my God, I have no idea what's happening right now. So do these strategies work for that type also? Or do you have a
not as much. It's not the same. This is more about hyperactivity. I'm not a doctor, so I don't want to say, but I do know that medication tends to be better for students. In my experience, students who I've dealt with in the past, I'll say in my limited experience, medication has helped with the students who are more like kind of zoned out or distracted in that way. Yeah, because that's actually like your train of thought goes onto some sort of tangent, if I'm understanding you correctly, if I'm thinking of the same type. And so this does help, but it's more about, the brain chemistry at that point, I think is a little bit different than someone that just has extra energy, right? Yeah, good question. Okay, so there are different tools you can use to help you with your breathing. This one on the left is called the Hoberman sphere. So it just expands and contracts. Maybe you saw those when you were a kid or you played with one. You can use that to inhale and exhale. Or here's like an infinity sign GIF that you can breathe when it's on the left side, and then you can exhale when it's on the right side. It can help pace out your breathing. Sometimes that's helpful for kids to have a tool like that. So you might Google some different options, or you also have this PowerPoint as well, so you can use that later if you want. Okay, so earlier we talked about neuroplasticity, this idea that your brain has to prune out the different connections, and we said it happens 3 times primarily, where it's big trimmings, big prunings. That's for your terrible twos, when you hit puberty, when you're 25, right? So the time from teenage years to 25, that's what we really want to talk about here in terms of how we can affect a teenage brain. And the way that you do that is through mirror neurons. How many of you have heard of this concept before? Have you heard of mirror neurons? This idea? Well, you know this to be true because when you had a baby, right? The first way that they learn is by watching they mimic what you do, right? So if you stick your tongue out, they're going to stick their tongue out, right? If you wave, they're going to wave, right? We mimic each other as human beings, and that's called mirror neurons. We mirror the neurons firing in someone else's brain. We want to copy that as humans, right? So if I'm sitting like this, you might want to lean back and sit with your arms crossed too, right? Or if you're touching your hair, maybe I want to touch my hair too, right? So we want to match each other as human beings, at least in terms of social situations. So knowing that, are you modeling, this is a loaded question, are you modeling the behavior that you want your sons and daughters to be exhibiting? How do you react when something stressful happens? How do you react when things don't go your way? How do you react when you're disappointed because things out of your control? I'll take some comments on that. I think it'd be interesting to hear. How do you model this behavior? Are you perfect at this?
I think for myself, I don't want to say I'm perfect at it, but I think I've had my kids comment to me actually recently, like Mom, you like don't have emotions, or like I'm just, because I'm always calm and I always like, I don't get like really, extreme ever. And so I'm presenting a very level-headedness at all times, which in a way I think that can be a bad thing, because I think it's good for them to see normal emotions too. So I think Yvonne has a lot of emotions. I'm just gonna guess.
I knew you were gonna say that, because we're always like the opposite, and I'm very like open about the good, the bad, whatever emotion. So my kids have seen a full spectrum of my reactions to situations.
Any of you ever yell at the dog?
Not my dog, my husband's dog.
What do we think about that? Is that something we do that is modeling, the calmness that we?
No, it totally. And now I'm thinking, I'm like, wow. And I've heard the exact same expressions that I use with the dogs. Like I've heard my kids say the exact same things to the dogs. So.
I know the dog's not a human, right? Like, so kids, of course, you can say, what you say to the dog, you don't say to grandma, right? Like there's a difference. But I think at the end of the day, it's about a pattern that our brain is picking up on, right? And I'm told, this is totally me. Like the mailman comes and my dogs go nuts every day. And then I get nuts at my dogs because they're yelling at the mailman, right? Or they're barking at me to let me know that the mailman's here. And it's like, every day I get a little bit triggered by that. And I'm like, shut up, like stop barking. Like I'm trying to do something here. Like I'm on Zoom right now, stop barking. And I know that it's not life changing. I'm not like, I don't go to bed at night and I'm like, you know what? Like I'm still pissed off about the dogs barking. But that is a subtle thing in my day that is a negative response that my brain is really being activated towards. So it's just an example, I think, because a lot of us are good at catching our emotions, especially when we're dealing with our kids. Not everyone, but you've had a lot of practice, right? If your kids are teenagers, you've had many years to learn how to deal with the frustrations. But there's things in our lives that we still don't even consider, that we're just kind of reacting to. It's just one example. Okay, so what psychology or brain training will you use? A good practice in neuroscience is just kind of reflect and think back what you just learned. So we learned about the different parts of the brain. The amygdala, the pink, is attached to your hippocampus, your memories. So your emotions are attached to your memories. And we learned about the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of our brain. We learned that we can strengthen the prefrontal cortex if we use deep breathing to calm ourselves down. We practice this focused kind of deep breathing. We can use that to help calm down our amygdala and to control our emotions better. Not to disregard them, but to acknowledge them and move on from them. Thank you for the alert. Thank you for the alarm, amygdala, but this is a false alarm, or I'm not going to get upset about this. Not that big a deal at the end of the day. Okay. So this last section, we'll spend just a few moments to talk about some self-care or some mindful practices that we can use with our teenagers to help them along their journey of life. So I like this little cartoon here. It says, you gotta nourish to flourish. And we see this water spout watering a plant. Now, what does that mean, right? What does this mean? The plant may grow by itself, but the plant may also not grow by itself. And you can guarantee that the plant will grow better, straighter, taller, stronger if we give it nutrients, if we water it, if we make sure it gets the right sunlight, right? So our kids are kind of the same way, and you're kind of the same way, in the sense that you'll be okay. You'll be okay. We're resilient. We're humans. If we don't take care of ourselves, we'll still be okay. We'll still probably survive. But do we want to actually flourish? And if we want students to flourish academically, if we want our kids to feel confident and successful and proud, then we have to nourish them. And we have to teach them the ways that they can nourish themselves. So that's what we're going to look at here. The first thing I want to share with you is this concept of growth mindset. I'm sure many of you have seen this already, but I'd be remiss if I didn't show you this. Growth mindset sees failure as an opportunity to grow. So maybe you've had an experience where your son or daughter brought home an assignment or a grade, or you get online, you say they failed it, right? They didn't do well on it. What was your reaction to that? How did you respond to that when your son or daughter failed something or underperformed academically? I'd be curious to hear if anyone wants to share. What's your reaction when your son or daughter fails? What do you say? What do you do? How do you act?
I think for me, it depends on, do I feel like they put all their effort into it? Like if I feel like they half-assed it, they didn't put in their effort, then I get frustrated because I feel like they could do more, that they didn't actually show their knowledge and their learning, because I know they know, especially with my son. Like he's very, very smart, but his grades and his effort hardly ever reflect how smart he is. And so I do get frustrated by that. However, if they brought home a not great grade and they tried their best, and like that was, then I'm okay. Like, hey, it's fine. I'm more about the effort. So
you have the growth mindset.
Hopefully. I'd like to practice what I preach.
Virginia says, I'm in school myself, so I immediately ask them what happened. I want to know their side of the story first, and then we brainstorm how we could improve. Very nice. Very nice. Well, if you're like me, I'm not so great when dealing with failure. I don't like failure. I struggle with this concept of like seeing it as a growth. As a coach, I coach volleyball. Some of you were here earlier, we were talking about that. When my team loses, I often get mad. And I'm not proud to say that, but it's true. Like I don't want to lose. And part of that, it maybe is a competitor in me. Part of that is an insecurity with me, like reflection on my coaching or whatever it is. And sometimes I think I'm maybe too harsh, right, on kids who are failing, saying like, we practiced this, you knew this, like you learned this. So practice and execution are two different things, right? And effort and then results are two different things as well. And so in school, sometimes students are putting forth a lot of effort for real, but the results just are not matching the effort. And that is something that I think as adults, we have to accept with a little bit more compassion and grace and say, okay, so was the effort misplaced? Do we need to tweak where you're putting the effort in? Do we need to change that somehow? Or are you just along the journey of reaching your full potential and your full potential is not the same timeline as this student or that student. And I feel like we compare ourselves to other people, and that's where we run into issues, right? In a sports league, by simple mathematics, like you can't all win every game, right? Like you cannot have 100% every time. Somebody has to lose in a sports contest. Now, the same isn't true in academics, but I think as human beings, academics, as you know, are oftentimes being compared to other people. And that's what students are doing, and they're beating themselves up for it. A lot of times they're saying, well, Nicole, she got an A+. Nicole always gets an A+. Nicole's so smart. She barely even studies. But Yvonne, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to pick on it. I'm not going to pick on Yvonne. We're friends. It's okay, everybody. So don't worry. So this is the concept of growth mindset, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, but it's something to consider. How do you respond when there's difficulties? Okay. So mindful movement. So we've been sitting for just a moment, and I want to take a chance to do a different type of brain break here. Movement is a really powerful thing, even just for a few seconds. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take one of your arms, it doesn't matter which one. I want you to put it across your chest, and then you're going to just kind of stretch it with your other arm, grip it with your other arm like you're giving yourself a hug. You might squeeze harder if you want to feel it more in your back. You might twist a little bit if that feels good to you. And we'll switch arms, switch sides. There we go. And we'll do one more. We'll do shoulder shrugs. So if you want to push your shoulders up or roll your shoulders forward. And maybe you want to inhale as your shoulders come up, and exhale as your shoulders come down. That's some next level coordination. Some of you are like, I don't know if I could match my breathing with my movement. And you can reverse the direction if you'd like. Okay. So that's mindful movement, right? Just focusing our attention on a particular movement. You might have noticed that you forgot what was going on during that moment. You forgot that there were other things happening, right? Maybe you stopped planning the rest of your day for a second. Maybe you stopped looking at your phone and checking Instagram or Facebook for a second because you're like, oh, what's this? This is something different. Or, ooh, I like movement. Maybe you feel a little warmness in your shoulders or in your back or around your upper torso area. That's like a blood flow is going there, right? So the oxygen's getting there to make you feel better in that particular area. So I know you know this, but a lot of times students will be sitting on Zoom all day and they like don't move, right? They're like little zombies. So I think it's important that took 30 seconds. It's a great way to continue to like give a reset, to take a little break with some movement. What else can we do? I like the idea of just like pause, breathe, reset. Sometimes I'll use this with my students in class. I'll say, all right, everybody pause, put everything down, put your phones down, put your, everything's down, nothing's in your hand, okay? Fold your hands together. So everybody folds their hands together. You can put your hands on your lap if you'd like. We're just gonna pause. We're gonna take one big breath. Ready, set, big breath. And now we're reset. That's a pause, breathe, reset. 10 seconds. Okay, so here's a quote that I'm curious how you feel about. If every 8-year-old is taught meditation, we will eliminate violence from the world within 1 generation. And this was said by the Dalai Lama. What are your thoughts?
It's a very optimistic quote.
I somewhat agree, because I feel like with meditation, you're able to kind of pause and maybe just be more mindful of how you're feeling in that moment. And I think a lot of times we just react when something upsets us, and we let our emotions get the best of us. And so oftentimes we're reacting in the moment instead of just taking a pause and really thinking it through and letting like more airflow get to our brain so we can make a more logical decision in that moment. So I think I see how that could contribute to eliminating violence in the world.
Thank
I
you.
might change it to if every 8-year-old is taught and practices daily meditation, will eliminate violence.
Mm. Yeah, there's a difference between teaching and learning, as we know. Yes.
What I like about this idea though, because I've definitely experienced this with my own kids, like when they're in the moment of like freaking out or like having like a really high intense emotional time, you can't just say, hey, pause, breathe, because they're gonna like blow up even more. Like that's like the wrong time to try to teach them to how to take a brain break, as you say, or like, you know, strategies to relax. You have to teach them in time so that they're not in crisis, you know, because in the moment they can't. So if you kind of have it like, and like that's the idea with this, like you like as an 8-year-old, you're teaching this so that way they can pull on that knowledge when they're older.
Yeah, completely. This is a preventative measure, right? In health, that's so powerful. Like if we can prevent the stress from building, we can stop a lot of bad things from happening. A couple of comments in the chat. Can we ask PE teachers to teach this as a 9th grade? That's an interesting idea. I would totally be in favor of that. And meditation is something can bring us to grow in a whole. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. So what could meditation look like other than just breathing and focusing? Like to be mindful or to meditate is often to bring your attention to the present moment, right? To just focus on the present moment. Some people use their breath as an anchor for that, to keep them in the present moment. But there's other ways to do that. And one of my favorite ones is a nature walk. Have you done this before? Okay, that's a picture of me on the bottom right. I'm just kidding. But here's how a nature walk works. You go wherever you like outdoors. It could just be in your backyard or in your front yard or, you know, down the street to the park, wherever. You don't talk and you don't look at your phone and you don't wear a smartwatch if that's going to distract you either. Okay, and no AirPods. Get rid of all the tech. I need to like scan you like a TSA scanner and make sure you have no tech on you, because those things are going to distract you, right? And you're going to be thinking about those things. And all you need to do is just pay attention to which of your senses are piqued by the things that you find in nature. The sight, the sound, the smell, the touch, maybe the taste. I put the question mark after the taste because I don't want you eating like poisonous plants or like a dog's peed on the grass. Like we're not trying to eat that in my neighborhood. But depending on where you are, maybe the taste. And when we do this, we start to have the same effect of taking the brain break, right? Our bodies calm down, the parasympathetic nervous system is relaxed, and we reduce the cortisol or stress level hormones in our blood to a more typical pattern. So it has a really positive effect. It's kind of amazing if you've never walked through your neighborhood like this in a mindful way. It's like, go do it after this call right now and try it out. Just 5 minutes if you don't want to walk very far. Just listen to everything in your neighborhood alone. My wife and I, we walk almost every day at lunch. And the other day I was like, wow, like the birds are so loud. Like I'm very sensitive to sound. I'm an introvert and sound like kind of triggers me. And like, oh, the birds are so loud. And my wife's like, what birds? Right? She never heard birds like in the neighborhood. Like she never noticed the birds, right? Like she knew birds are flying around, but there's so many different bird sounds. They all make different sounds, right? When they're with their song. I don't know. Maybe you've noticed the birds, maybe you don't. But if you haven't tried this is powerful. And you could do this as a whole family, a great activity to incorporate into your day. What's 10 minutes at lunch, or if everyone's home in the evening as the days are getting nicer and longer. Build it in as a habit, really. And maybe each day focus on a new thing, what you see. The next day you focus on what you hear. The next day you could focus on what you smell. I don't know if there's traffic around, maybe not that one. And things you can feel, the leaves, what you can touch.
Yeah, I think this is really great. And it's something that I've done, like, you know, you talk about like stuff that's changed in the pandemic. and just being at home more. This is definitely something that I have incorporated in my own life. And for me, it's probably more sight, but it's been really cool because this is how I take brain breaks during the day is I go out in my backyard and I like walk around the backyard, but just seeing the changes in my backyard, like through the seasons and noticing like, oh, look, this tree is now budding, or like before in the fall, the leaves are falling out, and just seeing like tracking the changes. It's been really cool.
Yeah, thank you. And the last thing I'll say, I know we're short on time here, but the last thing I'll say is that there's a lot of new research that's coming out in neuroscience that supports this idea of awe. We have to have AWE. We have to experience wonder and awe as human beings to really foster our happiness or our full self-actualization as humans. And one of the best ways to get wonder or awe is through nature, right? Seeing the ocean, right? Or seeing mountains. But it could be as simple as seeing a beautiful flower or seeing a tree. Things that we experience awe with, we need to have that as much as we can in our lives to create this balance. They're not exactly sure why, but there's a lot of research that is showing that this is correlated with happiness. So I think that is super fascinating. The last thing I was going to mention is gratitude, and that is infectious. So I just want to say thank you to Yvonne, to Nicole, to Ginny, to Shihui, to Amy, to Virginia, to everyone else, to Mr. Sanfilippo, who commented during this chat. Just thank you all for being here, for Lan, for Ian, Miss Perlin. It's been wonderful to have you all here. I know your kids, they may not always share their gratitude or their appreciation, but the fact that they have parents who take the time to do something like this is huge, is powerful, and it says a lot. And as a teacher at this school, it means a lot to me that you take the time out of your day to be here and support us. So Ginny, I'll turn it back over to you, and thank you so much for being here. And if anyone has questions, my contact information is in the PowerPoint as well, so people can feel free to email me or email you as well. I'm sure you can forward to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all. And thank you, Dave, for doing this and talking to us about this. I think this is such an important thing to learn about and to know about as a parent, like I said, so that you understand your teenager better, because the more we understand our teenagers, the better relationship that we have with them. So I want to wish everybody a wonderful rest of your day and rest of your week, and we will be back next week. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.